An angle I thought we could pivot this to, by the way, was I saw Travis did an interview with Mithy right after MSI, and one of the things that Mithy was talking about, this is how sad it is in League of Legends, guys, that like we have to bring these topics up and we always have to discuss them as though they're like abstract ideas. Like, wouldn't it be a good idea if we had X? But then when you actually talk about what you're talking about, if you're from any other game in esports, you're like, this still hasn't been fixed now. So the issue Mithy brought up was he thinks that there should be, understandably, a replay system in League of Legends, and even if it was like the pro view angle, if you record the pro view thing or whatever, which by the way technically I have stock in, which I always just say as a disclaimer because that's how actually ethics work, but okay, right? When you have these programs, essentially the idea is, I understand why, if people don't know, coaches in League of Legends sometimes had to, for many years, literally manually go frame by frame through VODs and just like use pencil and paper and write down things like, right, he placed this ward here, and then afterwards, like in the laning phase, I can only see little portraits, but it looks like he got like the auto off and then he won the trade. Like, they're having to do all the shit that anyone in any other game, like in Counter-Strike, by the way, you would just go to the main website, hltv.org, you download the demo, and you go to whatever POV you want. You just look for the whole game at everything that guy was doing. So Mithy's argument was he wants there to be like a database, and not just for teams and players, for everyone. Like, why can't everyone go and download, like, for example, a replay from MSI and see, right, here was the whole laning phase of Xiaohu in the top lane, or fucking Wei, the jungler, what did he do against Canyon? Right? To me, it's an obvious point, right? So essentially, I understand that I'm assuming everyone's going to be in favour of it, but do you have any thoughts, like, Wicked, from your perspective? Like, I know League's been your main game. Is it not weird that there's just never been proper replays? Like, any other game I know of has this feature, pretty much.
So from my perspective, if I was in one of the best teams in the world, right? Then I'd be like, yeah, we don't want this. This is really terrible. This is a bad idea, right? Games, you shouldn't do it. Because it's in my best interest not to share replays because it helps teams that are worse than me, right? I think as a content creator now, I'm on the complete opposite side where I'm like, I want it open because then I can make content about it and it's good. And it's something that it hurts the best teams, but it helps everyone else in the scene. And maybe it hurts Riot Games because of monetary value as well. I'm not entirely sure on that. But I think overall for the scene, it's a very healthy thing to have it open.
What do you think, Rich?
I mean, yeah, I think obviously kind of knowledge by, unanimous diffusion where everyone has access to everything basically is only going to prop the overall aggregate level of the game up, right? And as Wicked says, like, obviously that would be a situation where it's much more difficult to stay on top than reach the top because of how that would kind of impact the top teams. But in my opinion, like... Again, yeah, it so far as it would be maybe somewhat in my power or whatever as a player on the top team to not want it. Ultimately, I think if you're like, you shouldn't be against the idea. I would never be actively lobbying against the idea because I think, you want to, it's like the old adage of like, fighters want to fight fighters when they're at their best so there could be no excuses. It's like you kind of want everyone to push the scene higher, not just because it makes your own accolades more impressive or whatever, but it's probably going to push your team's level as well. Once people catch up to you in certain areas, then you're going to have to innovate, right? I think this replay system would really encourage innovation. And obviously initially it would just be copying, right? Like you get the lower tier teams in the lesser leagues just straight up copying strategies from being able to see every, LPL player's point of view or whatever. But I think it would plateau relatively quickly. And then from that point onwards, people are actually using the information to innovate and to push the envelope. So yeah, I mean, I see no negative reasons whatsoever to not have it other than what Wicked already outlined, which is obviously in the short term it could impact your status as the absolute best team if you're fearful that everyone's just going to steal your strats, and I'm sure that absolutely would happen. But I think overall for the scene it would be good. And I think it would be, if this happened and I was to attend the first World Championships, if they released it in spring, let's say, it would also be like a string to my bow, right? That I won Worlds despite everyone literally being able to see like every tiny thing that we did theoretically, right? We were the first team to do it, or we did it in the era of replays. That would like add some sort of clout to my own achievements. So yeah, I think it would be good.
Because if people don't know, one reason I actually found a new angle on this that a lot of people won't know because they're only from League of Legends and they don't know the other games is, right, the angle everyone always gets. I said earlier on about how fans will always like come up with their own reason as to why you did or didn't do something. There's a way to like mentally resolve the tension of there being like an issue, like, oh, should we have import rules or not? They'll come up with their own theory. If there's not one presented, they will just fill this vacuum with their own theory as to why it does or doesn't. So the classic one they always say in League is that old meme from Reddit that goes like, oh, League of Legends is like really badly coded and it's all spaghetti code and everything's a minion and they couldn't code it to do the replays because it was, making too large file size. Here's the problem with that angle, right? First of all, yes, League of Legends is a game that's very old and it wasn't intended for to be played in 2021, blah, blah, blah. But the reason why that doesn't actually hold weight anymore is a detail a lot of people I notice in esports. It's convenient how people never bring up the shit in their own scene. They just complain about other scenes. So we just had the first LAN in Valorant, right? League of Legends, Riot Games rather, or the game, the FPS game they've made to be their version of Counter-Strike. A lot of people are still not aware of this fact, Rich. I don't know if you will be, if you followed the game or not. Valorant doesn't have replays either. It doesn't have a demo system to this day.
Yeah.
Now, that logically cannot have anything to do with League of Legends being coded in 2008 or something, because it's a totally different game and it was only made in the last 2 years or something. So to me, that actually implies something I always suspected all along, which is, for whatever reason, I feel like Riot are just antithetical to the idea of a replay system. I'm not sure what it would be entirely, but something about it seems to turn them off, mate. So there's something about it that means they don't want it, because especially the fact, remember, that the billing of how people frame Valorant is that it is the Counter-Strike competitor, and that people frame it as Riot's coming to sort of take Valve's property, and in the same way as League of Legends overtook Dota, etc. So the implication would be, if you wanted to win people over, you would make all the features that Counter-Strike has. But it actually seems on this one like they're just going to sort of ignore people asking for it.
Maybe they're just scared that if their game gets reviewed enough times, everyone will just realise it's a slightly less skillful version of Counter-Strike. That would be my only theory on that one. I don't know. It's bizarre.
I mean, they could also be trying to monetize it, right? Look at Pro Views. Pro Views cost money. I remember paying for it myself, right?
Yes, true.
And that's a good angle for Riot Games. They want to monetize angles for people to get better at the game or analyze the game to a deeper level. And also, I think this restricted how much content you're allowed to make on LEC and Pro Views. So I think it's probably a monetary angle, which I mentioned earlier as well, a bit.
By the way, again, I will just reiterate, I technically have some sort of obscure indirect financial stake in the company that made ProView. Not directly, I don't make money from ProView myself, I just have ownership in the company. So I'll say that because I am about to then say the sentence, I'm not against the premise of ProView, but I mean in that regard. I don't mind if Riot wants to monetize it, by the way. That's why I would, if potentially I would marry the two concepts of what Mithy says about a database with something like this, and I would just make it like you have a pass you pay for monthly, and then you could either do it, depends which way you want to go on this. If Riot wants to somehow help teams, they could give them a free pass, obviously, or they could just have a different tiered pass. If anything, maybe you charge the teams for it. It's a service, right? I know in Counter-Strike, for example, the whole reason people made those advanced stats databases was the naive dream that the teams would pay them for access each month, $1,000 to have access to all this extra stats info, because they were taking the angle of it's going to be like Moneyball in fucking the movie or whatever, which obviously never really happened. But I get it, you could have that as a service. But I also agree with Mithy. I hope it will be open for the public. Even if it's through something like ProView, all you have to make it something like $10 a month, and the kind of person who's a hardcore fan, that's not too big a threshold. I'm in for $10. The point is, what do I get for it? If I get access to all the Pro Views, I don't think there's a problem with that. If Riot need to make more money, they can do that. I just want the functionality, personally, because I've always said, I'll give you a quick example. When I first came into League of Legends was around early 2013. I followed the game a little bit before that, but it was when I started actually watching it. And if everyone knows, my favourite player at the time was Flame of CG Enters Blaze. Well, famously, he was the one who did all the Flame Horizons. Now, here's the sad thing about that, guys. Not a single human being in this world has ever seen the whole laning phase on any of those fucking games, because obviously the camera wasn't on that the whole time. So I remember even back then thinking, this is absurd. So I can't even know what he did at this moment in the game. And that's just the world we all live in. So I find that bizarre. I wonder actually if there is a bigger issue though, because I know, for example, Rich, actually, this supposedly was also a problem in Overwatch, believe it or not. In Overwatch, what I said before was legit what Overwatch teams had to do. Overwatch League teams would have people watching demos, and theirs is an FPS, for God's sake, so they would have to pause an FPS and do things like guess based on what they could see on the screen, or the radar thing, where someone could be and what they were doing at that moment. And that game also didn't have a replay system. So I don't know what this is. It does seem like this is something that the game devs themselves, maybe Wicked's right, maybe they just haven't found how they want to monetize it, what angle, but it seems like what they don't want to do is give away the free functionality you used to get in games before they sort of cared about the esports side.
I think there must be some technical aspect to it, which they're just absolutely stumped by. And the reason I say that is simply because ProView did exist, right? And obviously they had like the bare bones, or they have the bare bones to do a lot of these things, like the way you interact with the normal replay system in game, for example, like, and how ProView works. You can see a lot of the functionality there, but there must just be some weird like thing that they just can't get to function with actually onboarding like an overarching service or something like that. And my guess would be that it probably will exist at some point, because again, one thing that Riot has been very good at is milking people for money, right? And I don't mean that in a negative or a positive way, but there's absolutely a market for this. It would be very lucrative, I would imagine, and there's no way that they're choosing just, you know, out and out not to do it for the sake of not doing it. I think there must be some kind of technical issue that they're struggling with. Because the bare bones are there for sure, and it would just be a cash grab other than anything else. And again, not in a negative way.
But I mean, the functionality is already there, right? Teams do already get replays of their own games, and I remember even when I played, we were able to get replays of our games if you wanted them. So I know the functionality is there. I also know there's replays you can get as a content creator, like you can download old clients, so you can use old replays as well. Okay. So I don't know if it's a technical problem, because that'd be weird to me, but maybe it's how to scale it up to the entire community.
But I think you maybe hit the nail on one of the points, right? Which is, if you're doing something in like a huge, let's just pretend it's a huge database, a huge archive, you as an individual have the know-how maybe to download which version of the game to be able to watch which replay or whatever, but to incorporate that into a easy accessible system where people can be like, okay, I want to watch this, I want to watch that, and maybe the videos I want to watch are 2 seasons apart. Maybe there's some technical issue in terms of what version of the game they can view that in or whatever. Like, I don't know. As I said, my guess would be there is some technical aspect to it, because otherwise I don't know why Riot would turn down the chance to make money off this. But I also agree with you that, yeah, as I said, I think the functionality seems to be there, that there must just be some kind of roadblock for them.